In a recent PR Daily article, Laura Brown, an assistant professor of public relations at William Patterson University in New Jersey, said that well-designed resumes and cover letters are essential to job search. However, once you secure an interview, a portfolio makes the greatest impact for showcasing achievements, abilities, skills, and credentials. Today, we are going to talk about how to put together a portfolio that will land you that next job. We will discuss everything from what to include in your portfolio, what formats you can use. We also are going to showcase a few of our favorite portfolios. Portfolios are more than just pretty pictures and links to projects. A portfolio is your proof point behind every skill you promote in your job interview. It gives the potential employer a sneak peek at what you could bring to the team. We hope you learned some valuable tips in today's episode. And now, on with the show.
You're listening to Young PR Pros episode 128, Building a Portfolio.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Young PR Pros, a podcast for the young and young at heart PR pros looking for tips and advice on how to build and advance their careers. I am Christine Darbell in Ottawa, Canada.
I'm Ross Simmons in Halifax, Nova Scotia.
So it's just you and me again, Ross. This is fun.
It is. It's two of us. It's
just the two of us.
Can't go wrong. I like it. That's a good song. That is a good song. I forget who sings it.
I'm
it's
not going to try to sing it.
It's an oldie.
I don't think we want
tempted.
to. I don't think I want to hurt my poor listeners, our poor listeners' ears if I just start singing. So I will save them all the pain.
I think that's a good call.
So, we actually have a pretty interesting episode today, and this comes directly from one of our listeners. So periodically, our wonderful listeners, and we really, really love when you guys do this, but we get letters and messages on social media and emails sharing your questions and your insight about our podcast through a variety of forums, and we really, really love to hear from our listeners. And sometimes those questions are so good that we figured we'd do an episode about it because especially this one that was sent in by Will. When I was reading his note to us, I realized that this is actually a pretty good question that could apply to anyone who might be listening to our podcast. So we love to hear your positive comments and, when you're stroking our egos and telling us how awesome we are. But if you actually have a really good question, you never know. There's a lot of people out there that probably have the same question. I don't know who told me this, but I know I've been told this several times before. But if you have a question, there's probably like 10 people around the room who are thinking of the same question. They're just all afraid to ask it. So if you ask it, then you'll hopefully help get the answer for everyone else. So Will, and here's what Will put in his note to us. So he said, I really struggle with figuring out the best way to organize my portfolio. For a lot of people in PR, as it seems, we all wear a lot of hats, and it's hard to showcase all that information in a useful way. I may focus on PR, but that doesn't mean that I don't also work in photography, videography, marketing, web development, etc. It seems that a lot of times we are expected to, in some degree, to do a lot of these jobs on our own. For me, I try and showcase that, but I'm not necessarily sure the best way to do it. I.e., do I showcase my skills, my clients, then the projects? It seems that everyone has a different opinion on this topic, and I would love to hear all your thoughts on this as well. So again, thanks, Will. This is a really important question, and building a portfolio is definitely not easy. So let's jump into the first part of his question, Ross. He says, what should listeners include in their portfolio? We'll just start at the basics. So you need to do a portfolio. What do you include?
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, the most valuable thing, if you were to prioritize what you should include in your portfolio, the first thing is real world work. So I know that when you're a student, you don't necessarily always have a chance to work with some real clients. Sometimes it's a case study or it's a hypothetical and you're developing work around that. But if you do have any work that was actually applicable to a real world project, I think that's what you would prioritize and place front and center. So that might be a video that you collaborated on. That might be a press release that you've written. That might be a business plan that you developed. It could be anything like that. So I would prioritize those types of things. And then what I would do when I'm sharing that work, rather than just kind of showing the work and giving it away, frame it in a way where your audience truly gets a better understanding of what it was that you were trying to accomplish. So you want to talk them through the current situation, which is what the client may have came to you with, what your recommendations were, so how you were to help them, and then at the end of it, what was the end result? So what happened because of your engagement? So if somebody approached you and they wanted a logo, you are going to break out, Jim and Joe's Bakery came to us and they were interested in developing a logo. They had a clip art logo before and they wanted to create something new. Step 2 was us actually designing it. So I designed it, taking into consideration their young audience. And the result was they saw an uptick of people who were interested in commenting on Facebook saying how much they love their logo. So that would be the model I would take. And I wouldn't go over the top in showing like 30 different projects that you worked on. Keep it short and sweet. People don't have time to kind of go through that many.
Yeah, I agree on the being concise. Clear and concise is super, I think, clear, because you're right. I mean, think about the audience, which is a potential employer. Some people could be looking at hundreds. I mean, maybe it's hundreds of resumes, but even so, sometimes they're still down to like 50 candidates that they have to look at, and maybe they're looking at portfolios for each of those 50 candidates. And if you've got a 50-page document that you're sending, you'll turn off the potential employer very quickly, or there'll just be too much information and they'll only skim through it and they won't be able to dive into the meat of each individual project. So you want to keep it clear and concise. And I think another thing to keep in mind is, just like your cover letter and resume should be tailored to the job that you're applying for, your portfolio should as well. So maybe when you're putting together your portfolio, and hopefully this is something that you do periodically. I mean, it should be something you do periodically so that one day if you want to apply for a job, you don't have to spend 5 hours putting together a portfolio or more. But I mean, even I try to tell myself to do that, but I don't always have time, or I always forget. But you should kind of, as you do a project that you're really proud of, maybe write up a few sort of notes on it and then throw it in a folder somewhere. And then sort of collect them over time. And then when you're about to apply for a job, look at all those projects that you've collected over time and only pick the 2 or 3 that are going to answer this, or that are going to reflect the skills that particular job is looking for. So going back to Will's question, he was saying, do I showcase photography, videography, marketing, web development, PR, news releases? What do I showcase? What do I actually put in there? And I think it depends. Look at the job that you're applying for. If the job says, we really need someone who is a good photographer, or we really need someone who's good with who's built a video before, or it would be really nice if someone had some web development background, then that's when you kind of choose which projects to showcase in your portfolio. And again, so if you kind of do that periodically over time and you keep collecting projects and putting them aside, you may have theoretically a portfolio that has 30 projects, but you only pick and choose the ones, and then you build a targeted portfolio for the job that you're applying for. So diving down a little bit into the actual items that you'd want to put into your portfolio, I recently had to do a portfolio for my master's application. And I collected media interviews. So if you happen to be a spokesperson, or if you've pitched a news story for your client or for the company that you're working for, and there was actually a resulted media clip, so the good old newspaper clipping. I mean, we used to cut it out. I didn't used to cut it out, but it used to be a day where you actually cut out, the newspaper clip, and then you'd put that into your portfolio. Nowadays, it's just a link to the news. Yeah, so that's a nice way to, if you're going to be choosing sort of media interviews, or even if you want to choose a news release to showcase your work, then you want to make sure that news release actually had a result, right? I mean, if you had a really great news release and it was
Yeah.
written nicely, it's nice to kind of put it in your portfolio, but whether or not you want to use that to showcase your skill, especially if your skill is like media relations is not just writing a news release. Media relations is actually building a project that leads to media clippings. Same thing with projects. So in my master's application, what I did is I chose um, three projects that I felt really showcased my unique skill in communications. And I kind of did actually what you did, or what you were explaining, Ross, is that it was a recap of the project. So I had different headers. So it was a Word document. I started off with, what was the ask? So what was the goal and the objective of the project? Who was the audience? What was our strategy? What were the tactics? And then what were the results? And then within that document, so not only through one page could they quickly glance at, where did this project come from, like the beginning, middle, and end, but then they also got to see the results. So I also made sure to showcase not just the projects that I really enjoyed working on, but the projects that were really successful. So I mean, one thing to kind of keep in mind, you might only have two or three projects to show in your portfolio. So you start with that. But as you kind of build up and you get more and more projects to showcase, you're then going to want to be picky and only choose the ones that showcase your skills.
Love it.
So the other question that Will had was about the format, which I think is actually kind of a fun discussion because, is it a PDF? Is it a website
Right.
or a web portal? Do you do a video where you're sort of interviewing yourself? So I'm curious, Russ, have you seen any portfolios come across your desk, or do you think of anything unique that you've seen?
Yeah, I've seen a few. Primarily, it comes across as just a PDF, and people will kind of tell their story, and then they include a few examples of work that they've done. But if you want to stand out and you want to create something a little bit more unique, a website or a video are definitely encouraged. Like, I think they're a great way to stand out. But I would say, first and foremost, you need to have that PDF document to kind of showcase what you bring to the table. Even in like business, when I'm pitching for new work, it's nice to be able to throw a video in, but it's definitely a PDF that gets circulated amongst the offices and amongst clients' desks. So I would definitely say a PDF is the first and foremost thing that you want to kind of double down on. And then from there, look at, if you have the time to customize it, then you can look into video on a website. And one of the things that I talked about in an earlier episode, I forget which one, it's just the idea of owning your own name as it relates to a website, and using that as somewhat of a portfolio piece is important. So I always recommend to people, take your first name, take your last name, add.com, and buy it. It might cost you $9.99. That's $9.99, not $999. And I would strongly recommend that you purchase your own domain. I think it's a key asset that everybody should have moving forward.
Yeah, I agree on the PDF side. Again, for my master's application, I had to upload, and they specifically said a Word or a PDF document. So the
Right.
people, I mean, also if you just think about the people that you're applying for, so the people who are in management or senior management levels, also tend to be a little bit older, which means, at least in my experience, I found that they, still prefer paper. And I mean, I'm one of those young people that still prefer paper. So there's nothing wrong with, paper. But, the last time we did a round of hiring, we were printing the resumes and we were printing the portfolios, and they were, sitting on the desk so that we could leaf through them and make some notes so that when we sat in the interview, we had notes in front of us. So the sort of traditional PDF or Word document is still goes a long way, I think. And to your point, PDF is good because anyone can open it, and if you want to be unique with your style, it's not going to mess up if someone has a different Word version than you. So PDF is always a nice thing, so that everyone, whatever you see on your computer in front of you, is going to be seen by everyone who opens that document. But on the website, one thing that I did when I applied for my job at CAA is, part of the job description was having some knowledge in social media. So I figured I want to showcase a little. So it was a little bit of showing off that I knew about social media.
Right.
So I showed up with a Pinterest portfolio. where I created a Pinterest board, and a Pinterest account, and then each board showcased different skills. And then within each of those boards, I linked to, media interviews that I had done. So I was showcasing my media relations abilities. Another one, I was showcasing like my writing. So I linked to a blog post, and then I uploaded like a picture of a document that I had written. What else did I do? I linked to a bunch of other things. So each board had like a different skill. So I also called it my Pinterest resume, but it was essentially
Yeah.
a portfolio, because it was showing my different skills and then the proof behind those skills. I had media relation, but here are the proof that I've done it and I know what I'm doing. Here's a social media skill and strategic skill, and here's the proof that I've done it and I know what I'm doing. So that was fun. And again, I knew my audience. My audience was looking for someone who knew their way around social media. So for me, it was also to show them, not only do I know about Pinterest, but I can make a board and all that kind of stuff. So
Right.
there was an alternative motive for that particular portfolio. But I think you can be really creative with these things. I mean, if we'll go back to Will's question. I mean, he said that he had some web development capabilities. So if you want to build your own website, then just the fact that you've built your own website, you're adding to your portfolio. You've just shown someone that you
Right.
have the skills to be able to build a website. So it's but then again, going back to the ultimate goal, you're applying for a job with a potential employer. Look at the job description. What do they want? And then build your portfolio according to that. And then just make sure that you're showcasing the right skills. Okay, so it's time for our Breakfast Club segment, where we share some articles that you should read over breakfast tomorrow morning. Ross, do you want to kick it off? What's your article that you want to share with us today?
I will. So this one is written and published on hustleandgrind.co. So one of the brands that I operate, but shameless plug, but also one that I think is extremely valuable and that I think a lot of people will get some great insight from. So this one is around LinkedIn, and in particular, it's talking about how to ensure that you're giving the right message with your profile photo. So it's all about the different things that you should consider and why it's important to not only be on LinkedIn as a professional, but also how to ensure that your profile is giving the right message to people who are viewing it. So the title is Your LinkedIn Profile Photo. Are you sending the right message? And I'll send over the link so everyone can check it out.
Awesome. The link that I wanted to share, kind of going with the theme of our episode, building a portfolio. This is not particularly building a portfolio, but once you've built your portfolio, it obviously means that you're probably heading into an interview. And I found this really good article on Forbes, which is titled 10 Tips for People Who Get Nervous at Job Interviews. And I think often what happens in our industry, PR, communications, and marketing, people tend to, assume that our group is, type A personalities, and we all just love jumping into crowds and talking to random strangers. And although that might be true for some people, I know that there's a lot of people like me and I know, Ross, you've talked about this before too, and especially when you're, trying to, get yourself onto a stage and practice and wanting to be extroverted and all that kind of stuff. But I'm one of those like introverted, extroverted. Like it's a mix between the two. For me, like going to a
Right.
networking event, I could do it, but I've got to prepare myself, and it is hard work for me sometimes. So even myself, I get super nervous before interviews, and I get nervous in interviews as well. So there are some people who are natural at it, and some people have to work at it a little bit. And I'm one of those people that, I do get nervous and I psych myself out a little bit. So these tips in the Forbes article are really, really great. So one of the ones is just perfect because it really reads to exactly what I do, but over prepare for an interview. And because I'm so nervous for interviews, I purposely do this to make sure that I cover every single question that might be asked. And
Right.
if you would be a fly on the wall, you would like laugh at the kind of questions that I try to prepare for, because most people would be like, who would ask that? Why are you even, anyway, I go overboard, but it is a really, really good tip. If you are nervous, then the best way to relax in the interview is to over prepare, so that when you do sit in the chair and you've got this potential employer asking you questions, you know that you're not going to be surprised by anything, because a lot of the nervousness behind an interview is, well, what if I can't answer the question? Over prepare, and then you get rid of that anxiety right away. A couple of other really good ones. Take a test drive is a really fun one. Testing out interview tips with your friends, and having a friend pretend to interview you. It's always fun to have a friend that likes asking hard questions, so that this way you prepare for the hardest questions, so the easy ones just seem so much easier.
Right.
Anyway, I could go on, but there's like a good 10 tips in here, and if you're like me and you're a little bit nervous and a little bit of an introverted person, these are really good tips to help you for your next interview. And that's it. Do you have anything else to add for this episode, Ross?
No, the only thing that I would say is to build on the introvert side of things. There's a great book that I recently read called The Secret Lives of Introverts by a lady named Jen Graneman or something of that nature. I think I butchered her last name. But it's really good, and it's cheap on Kindle. I think you can get it for like $2, maybe $3 Canadian if you're in that part of the world. But it's a really good book, and I definitely recommend people check that out as well.
Oh, well, that's awesome. So we'll make sure to include that in the link in our blog post for this episode. So that's a good book to read. I think I'm gonna have to pick that up, because it's,
I think you'll love it.
I'm sure I'll love it. Yeah,
it's really good. Yeah, I've given it to a few people, and all of them say that they find like their personal mantra and stuff like that out of it. So I'll definitely
that's awesome.
Send that link over.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this week's episode of Young PR Pros. We would love to hear from you and hear what you thought. You can email us at youngprpros@gmail.com. Check out our blog at youngprpros.ca. We're on Facebook at Young PR Pros, and of course on Twitter at Young PR Pros. Thanks, and we'll talk to you next time. This episode featured tracks by Lee Rosevear. Sound work and editing by Claire Bonnyman.